All right. Good morning, Doug. I am back in Colorado. You are still in Uruguay. I want to talk to you about something I've been thinking about personally a lot the last couple of weeks, and that is the idea of moral courage. And it's a complicated idea because I think it often is twisted as, sacrificing yourself for the whole. And I don't think it means that at all. But I want to hear your thoughts on it. And, I guess how important of should the ideal of moral courage be in our own lives, or is it just a fantasy anyway?
Yeah, well, I absolutely don't agree with any definition of that term that has to do with sacrificing yourself for the majority or the greater good, partially, well, because I don't believe in sacrifice as being a moral good. I mean, you got to define what sacrifice is. And basically, it's the giving up of a greater good for a lesser good. And that's not only stupid, but it's immoral in itself. So forget about that. But I knew we were going to talk about this today, so I thought it would be good to look up a definition of courage. And I did. And just as I just commented a moment ago about the use of sacrifice to do with moral courage, it was an unsatisfactory definition. Here's what I found on the Internet Dictionary. I'm sure if I delve further, I could get a better definition, but this is the first one that came up. It says, the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty, danger, pain, etc. Absolutely true. But it says, without fear. But wait a minute. Facing these things without fear might just mean that you don't see the fear. That doesn't take courage when you're not. Courage is what you have when you're afraid and you do it anyway.
Right.
So it's not a question of without fear. It's a question of conquering fear, which is very different. So, a further indication that the degradation of the language,
You almost like
degradation of
all these people,
morality.
Sorry, all these people who are like, maybe the BLM supporters or the Antifa people who probably believe they're acting with courage because they're facing some, ambiguous enemy, really, something you can't really see or touch, but they're standing up against it. But they're doing it probably not in the face of fear at all, because they're not actually confronting anything that actually offers real risk to them.
No, that's right. And of course, when they got a whole bunch of their buddies around them, that takes the element of fear away.
Yeah.
Because you're part of a conquering army. You don't have to be afraid. So, yeah, exactly. That they're not courageous at all. And the other day, when we were talking, and I mentioned Solzhenitsyn, of whom I'm a great fan. His writings are absolutely great, and they're absolutely terrifying. I mean, he can write for pages after page after page with recounting just absolutely the most horrible and terrifying things. Solzhenitsyn. Anyway, that's a side.
And he's the Gulag Archipelago guy?
Yeah, the Gulag Archipelago. It's a gigantic book. I think it's like 3 volumes. I read a 1-volume compilation of the high points. So I'm sure all 3 volumes couldn't go on like that. But 1 volume was quite enough. And I do recommend people get it to realize how horrible this was. Actually much more horrible than anything that what Stalin did was much more horrible than anything that the Nazis did, believe it or not. And actually saying that, I think might constitute or might a bit of moral courage on my part, because you're not supposed to say anything good about that particular past enemy. All other past enemies, that's fine. We can point out their good points and their bad points. But the Germans during World War II are just absolutely off the scale. for being totally evil. You're not supposed to say anything that's
Right.
redemptive about them. But anyway, let's talk about Solzhenitsyn. Uh, you know, he felt ashamed that he showed, he has got great moral courage as far as I'm concerned, but he pointed out that he was ashamed that he didn't have adequate moral courage when he heard the clomp of the NKVD boots walking up the stairs to take out an iron bar or a kitchen knife and attack these people. And, why was that? And maybe it's because they were representatives of the state. If he knew they were just, mafia guys or common street criminals
Exactly.
who were walking up to do horrible things to everybody, he and his neighbors undoubtedly would have counter-assaulted them. But the state has, such an aura of moral righteousness about it that gives people hesitation. Anyway, just a couple idle thoughts about moral courage.
I think that's really important. One of the things is that, all of this bad stuff, like as the Soviet Union was taking root and Stalin was really, engaging in his most evil acts, there were lots of things that I assume Solzhenitsyn would know about that happened, know about like he would know, he could probably see the trend. But I think one of the interesting things about when you think about what it really means to act with moral courage is that you're not acting against a theoretical thing. You're not fighting for freedom. You're not trying to get a new person elected into office or something like that. It seems to me that moral courage exists in a moment where you are confronted with, where you stumble upon, or like something shows up on your door, and it seems like it's an act of, often an act of self-defense, is where you draw that line. You have and you stand up for yourself in self-defense, or in your presence you witness something personally that crosses some line for you that you just say, no, I'm not going to accept this. And I think that the distinction I've had with moral courage and trying to understand whether or not it's something I could, is useful to me as I'd like to really think about and how I look for ways I could actually deploy it better in my life, was it's not about the causes. It's not trying to promote a cause or trying to do something like that. It's much more when it seems like there's almost a confrontation component to it. You stumble across something, or like you, even earlier, you find yourself in a position with an audience saying a thing that you're not allowed to say. But you're not going out there trying to, I guess you're not going out there protesting for something. You're not trying to stop the steal is not a demonstration of moral courage, going out and assembling with a group to try and protest with the stop the steal of, Trump in the election. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Moral courage is something that you have to deal with as an individual, I think, not really as part of a group or a movement. You do something because it's just not right, because it's frankly because it's evil.
Mm.
And it does take a lot of courage to do that. It can range all the way from, being inconvenienced, being held up by the authorities that come by, and you might have to make explanations to them of why you did or said something, to personally endangering yourself. But yeah, no question about it.
Are there examples of what are some examples of moral courage that we witnessed through history, or even especially recent history? Are there any that come to mind?
Recent history of
Tough, isn't it?
moral courage.
I have one example.
Let's see. Have we seen any moral courage among any government employees in recent years?
One.
I'm not sure that we
I would say one.
have.
Edward Snowden.
Yes, an ex-government employee, because he showed moral courage. And Julian Assange,
Yep.
quite frankly. they're in the same class. Yeah, yeah, they're very good examples, and it didn't end well for them doing that.
Nope.
I'm trying to think of when have I had to confront this recently, and of course, when you don't show when you know in your heart that you have shown moral cowardice as opposed to moral courage,
Yeah.
you prefer to just push that to the side and not remember it because it's
Painful.
so embarrassing to yourself. But I was just thinking, have I done this recently? And I wrote an article a while back, taking politically incorrect words and defending them. For instance, hate speech. That's something that I defended, and as being something that may not be very salubrious or very aesthetic, but it's a good thing. So I was defending hate speech, but nobody's come out and counterattacked me on this. I haven't heard from Antifa or BLM about the value of hate speech, maybe just because I haven't even read what, because we all live in a silo. And I'm sure they just read things in their silo, and we just read things in our silo. But actually, if I were to republish that article today, it would take some courage, because these people would, they'd pile on by their thousands to think that somebody could say something defending hate speech. That's like defending Hitler, for God's sake.
Exactly.
But it's the same type of thing.
Yeah, I definitely think speaking up I think speaking up actually can be very incredibly brave and does require moral courage. I think because I was reading some, not that reading academic papers about the idea of moral courage and like the study of it would necessarily be very informative, but I found a couple that were interesting. And one of the things that they found is that it was very often tied to a sense of indignation. Like it seemed like there was there's an anger component to it, that when someone does it, and I don't, not anger like rage out of control, but an anger that makes it easy to just say no, hell no, like no, this is not going to happen. Like I'm going to, it's much more as a defense against something that you see that crosses some line, that you have in your head that it just should not be crossed, then is what causes you to, I guess, to stand up. And I think that's why you feel that shame if you don't do it, because you felt it, you felt no, and you just, turned around and walked away.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't show moral courage in some circumstances, then you say to yourself, wait a minute, I couldn't live with myself if I let this pass.
Right.
So you can't let it pass, or you can't live with yourself, quite frankly. And, this reminds me of something that's missing from American society. And I don't just mean moral courage, which definitely is. And there are a lot of examples of that we could talk about. But it's Western movies. We don't have Western movies anymore. They used to be really big at a certain time in our history, from the time actually that the movie was invented. Say
part of it.
Yeah, say that after the turn of the century, cowboy movies, Western movies were part of the firmament of society. And I don't know when the last Western movie has been shown in theaters. Do you have any idea when the last one might be? There have been a few. There have been the 3:10 to Yuma with Russell Crowe and a couple others.
Yeah, some Clint Eastwood. True Grit was one.
Yes, and all Clint Eastwood's movies. He likes, Clint Eastwood. He always likes to play heroic characters, and so he's got a high quotient of Western movies actually.
Yep.
In his repertoire, I think. Like I'm trying to think of a couple of them, but there aren't nearly as many as there were during the 50s and 60s, when half of all the TV shows on the air were Westerns. And there were a huge number of Western movies that came out. I mean, I think the archetypical Western movie is High Noon, starring
Mm.
Gary Cooper.
Yep, I think so too.
That was great. And probably my personal favorite movie is The Wild Bunch, starring William Holden and Ernest Borgnine, among others, because that showed that even bad guys, these guys were train robbers and they weren't very virtuous generally, but they showed moral courage at the end of that movie. I don't know if there are many movies like that anymore, and it's a reflection on society, the kind of movies that are made today. I mean, today movies are made, because they're about Black people, or they're about women, or they're about, some currently fashionable accident of existence, as opposed to anything having to do with real moral courage.
One of the things I was reading and thinking about this, I was trying to think about what the difference between exhibiting moral courage and heroism, because they're not, because they don't seem like they're the same. They're not actually. And my conclusion I came to about them is that they're fundamentally different in one way, and that is that moral courage does not. There's the great risk to the actor, to the individual who's acting with moral courage, is there's personal risk around, of course, injury maybe or whatever, but it's mostly social risk. It's doing the unpopular thing. And a hero is a champion of everybody doing what people universally almost recognize as good. So, you know what I mean? It's like it's standing against the crowd. Like moral courage is standing against the crowd more. A hero is one who steps in for the crowd.
Well, perhaps there's another distinction. Perhaps there's a difference between moral risk, which is, psychological and spiritual in nature, perhaps, and physical risk. I mean, physical courage. I mean, they're different things. You can have people that are physically courageous that don't have much moral sense.
That's a good
Don't
point.
seem to
Yep.
the same degree. And we've got to define the word hero too, because this is another problem with our society today. Is today everybody is a hero. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. You're a hero. No, you're not a hero. I mean, a hero is somebody that, definitely steps out and does something great. I mean, everybody can't be a hero. That it degrades the word, like so many things.
It does. I remember after 9/11 when they were calling all the firefighters heroes, and some of them I'm probably engaged in some heroic acts, but most of them are probably just carrying hoses, or and not to say it's not, they're doing the job. And I'm not trying to belittle that. I'm just trying to compare that with like a Medal of Honor winner, who goes back, shot 18 times and drags 18 of his buddies back to the chopper.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, the firefighters at 9/11 were good guys that were doing their job, but these guys have to do a job similar to that every day. They didn't know that they were going to be killed. I mean, they really didn't. It was just another job. So maybe they're heroes every day. Well, once again, that degrades the term. Yeah, you're quite correct. It's not like winning a Medal of Honor.
Okay, so defining the fundamental difference between a hero and somebody who's just a good guy doing their job. Well, what would be the distinction be? That they know the risk, or they have a sense of the risk?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely part of heroism. It's recognizing that there's real, clear, and very present danger, and walking into it. That's, and I think heroism really has definitely a physical component. I mean, it's a question of, it's easy to talk the talk, but then if you got to walk the walk, that's a lot harder.
Right. So you could exhibit moral courage in the fact that you will say something that people think you shouldn't say. So by taking a stand with presenting an idea, that could be an example of moral courage. But highly, highly unlikely to make one a hero.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So these are good distinctions that people think about or should think about. And I was reading the other day, incidentally, and it turns out that the Chinese have come up with a term. It's called Baizuo, and I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not sure. And what it means is white left, and it refers to Western leftist ideologues that all these woke people are espousing, and it basically it's a sarcastic, a derogatory reference to people whose political opinions are guided by emotions and hypocrisy, trying to show selflessness and empathy for the downtrodden, but they don't really. So it's all phony stuff, and it's the reason I bring it up is that the Chinese have noticed this going on in America, and they've actually had to coin a word for this kind of disgusting hypocrisy, because even they can see it, that these people are insincere.
You got to have a name for it. Having a name for it, helps. We should try and I'm gonna look that word up and figure out how to spell it and how to pronounce it. Make sure I'm getting it right, because I think we don't popularize a word like that basically defines something so succinctly that we see everywhere, but we tend to just call it being hypocritical or being woke.
Yeah, exactly. And you can call these people wokesters, and you can call them, I guess we have a lot of words for them, SJW, social justice warriors. But I think it's better when a rather different, even alien culture like the Chinese see it as being so ridiculous, so hypocritical, so disgusting, so degrading, that they come up with a word for it themselves.
It's fantastic.
To call these white people over here who are doing this. Baizuo.
I love it.
I think that's it.
And it's the white left.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So what do you think? Why do you think that we have such a shortage of very few examples of moral courage that we see day to day? Because I feel like moral courage is, in a way, it's exhibited in, if nothing else, in self-defense. When you are being personally actually attacked, that's when you would, like Solzhenitsyn was saying, in his example, where he felt shame about not exhibiting that moral courage when the state came, into the apartment. I'm just curious why there's been so much attack like that on people. I do wonder why we don't see more examples of moral courage from them.
I wonder if we do we in fact have less moral courage today than we have in the past. And I think we can argue that, yeah, we actually do, being as objective as possible. And of course, I understand that the good old days when giants walked the earth, and now we're just all weak pussies. I mean, even Plato said that. Plato was talking about the youth of his day as being not what they once were. So this is perhaps a natural human feeling, but I think there's actually some reason for believing that we're degrading in the West. I mean, we've talked about how Western civilization itself is objectively crumbling right beneath our feet. I mean, you can list things and you can see it happening before you. But talking about moral courage, there was an instance in the New York Times that I read the other day. Somebody sent me the article where, some woman who's a writer of young adult novels had called out somebody else for saying something that was very Baizuo. And the left and all these SJWs jumped on her. I mean, apparently there were hundreds of them, and they approached her publisher and said, "Don't publish this woman's books because she said something that was, very reasonable and logical." And I wouldn't have thought it was offensive at all. And so, what did she do? I mean, if she had moral courage, she would have doubled down and explained it in a lot of detail, exactly why she said that, and taken the show on the road. But instead, she rolled over, and I read her apology letter, and it was so insipid. I was absolutely disgusted. By it was almost as if she was in China of the Cultural Revolution, where you had to have self and mutual criticism sessions where you tell the group what a horrible person you are.
Right. Struggle sessions.
And that's what the Baizuos are getting people to do. They get corporations to do it too. I mean, all these corporations today are just rolling over on their backs like the whip dogs they are and wetting themselves. And I say, God, I wish these corporations would go bankrupt. And I sent you an article not too long ago, like on 10 corporations that were especially bad offenders. And they didn't even mention Gillette Corporation, which a couple of years ago ran that ad where, it made white heterosexual males into actually the devil incarnate. Do you recall that commercial?
Yes, it was against toxic masculinity.
So called, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it turns out corporations everywhere are doing this. I mean, they've been completely captured, by the Baizuos.
So are there any examples of them standing up against it that you can think of business leaders or of even individuals that you've seen just even demonstrate the inkling, that they lean towards some moral courage at all? Have you seen any examples of it?
The only thing I can think of recently, I don't know if it's a good example or not, is Patrick Byrne, who founded and ran Overstock.com, talking about his experiences with Hillary and bribery and this whole thing with Trump and that. I can't think of anybody else so offhand. Can you?
I was, I've been thinking about this a lot of last week. So I have three real quick examples. One from a corporation, and actually was the CEO of Coinbase, who is the exchange. It's probably the biggest exchange in the U.S. for cryptocurrencies and fiat. And he had a bunch of woke employees, and he said, "Hey, not the place for you. Fine, we will pay you to leave. You have on Monday, just submit your resignation, and we will." And he basically was telling them they weren't welcome there, and that he would basically give them a big severance package to leave. But his letter, where he was basically explaining that we're not this kind of a company, we're not going to do it like this, and that's fine. We wish you well, but you got to do well somewhere else. Broadly to all of his employees, I thought really stood out, because it was the only example on a corporate level that I've seen this happen in, and I thought that was really, really good. That was a few months ago. The other one,
that's excellent. The only objection I would have there is I wouldn't give them a severance package at all. I would simply fire their asses and do so with prejudice. So I think he was entirely too nice. And that was one of the problems I think we diagnosed when we were talking about John Mackey and his way of handling these things. It's entirely too nice. I mean, when you're dealing with, rabid, crazy, evil people, there's a limit to being nice. And I don't think a big severance package is part of it.
well, let's say, this is what I thought the reasoning for it is that it wasn't as though all of the woke were identified. So he could see it brewing in his company, but it's not like he knew who they all were. And so to identify them, he basically set real clear expectations. We do not accept this. This is not what we do. You need to go somewhere else. And to make it easier on you, the people who might otherwise stay rooted and burrowed in his corporate structure without him knowing, they offer this upside. Now, I think it's for that reason, is to kind of get them to identify themselves and just move them out also without causing, as much stress within the company. But obviously when these people identify themselves and they make demands on the company, then I think that's different. I think that's fundamentally different. In that case,
Yeah.
you got to fire them.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Good point. So he should be proud of himself. But, like one large publisher that you and I are both familiar with, I know for a fact, because these people do identify themselves and have identified themselves, and they're not fired.
I know.
It's welcoming poisonous vipers into your house when you don't dismiss these people, and you don't even have to have any reason to dismiss people, as far as I'm concerned.
Nope.
Of course, they'll all file lawsuits. They'll say, well, it was because of, I'm a woman, or I'm gay, or I'm black, or, the usual panoply of things. But you don't own a job. Anybody should be fired at will, as long as that's not breaking a previous agreement that was made.
So this is actually a good example of why the moral courage isn't there, or what I'd like to explore further, because you have this basically, to me, what looks like what seemed clearly the leaders of this publishing company essentially got a list of demands, signed by a large number of the employees. Small percentage wise, but it was a large number of employees, and it's essentially a threat against you. It was a threat. And how does that not cause the indignation that it would, that would trigger moral courage? Like if you don't draw the line there, then where is there a line at all?
Yeah. In addition to showing that you're a weakling and you don't know what's right or wrong, you simply can't have, look, a business should be a big, happy family where everybody gets along. So who was the idiot that hired these people to start with, that didn't have adequate investigation into what their views were, that they let them in the door? So there's some rot that goes a lot deeper than not firing them, quite frankly. Yep. And it's what Lenin said, quite correctly. And Lenin said a lot of really smart things, many of them showing that he was really basically a really evil guy, but he was a smart evil guy.
Yep.
And he said the capitalists will sell us the rope that we use to hang them.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect example of it, where you're giving these people experience, you're giving them money, you're giving them credibility, and that's pretty much selling the enemy the rope that they're going to use to hang you.
Yeah, and I understand how you could kind of even be nuanced into that situation, like how just inertia could take you there in an organization. But when they pull the knife on you, like like they're no longer hiding, like they pull the knife on you, and then you choose to ignore it or appease. Like, I guess maybe it's that they don't and this is what I felt like with a lot of people, is they don't actually understand that they are being attacked, that self-defense is critical. We all have to be willing to defend ourselves, or everything falls apart. And when your employees pull a knife on you like that, this is an attack.
Yeah. Who's in charge here, actually?
Yeah. Clearly they are.
Yeah. So complete lack of moral courage across the board in corporate America. And it shows itself in so many ways. Taking the Indian girl off the front of Land O'Lakes butter, taking Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben off of rice and flour. These people are just disgusting. In fact, they're more disgusting than the SJWs and the wokes are.
I agree.
So this trend is accelerating. So as long as the trend is accelerating, it's, it means corporate America and America in general has got a pretty damn grim future. And I'm not even talking about the other things out there.
Right. We don't have to get into economics or
Yeah,
totalitarian government, none of that stuff before. We're already in a bad territory.
no, it's it's getting worse at a hyperbolically, exponentially increasing rate. It seems pretty clear to me. I don't see any changes in the trend. I'd love to, but everybody's just rolling over because they've got no moral courage. And they probably got no physical courage either, come to think of it. So,
But I
I
think
mean,
so.
you can have physical courage, you got to have some moral courage anyway,
I mean,
unless you're just a daredevil. I don't know. They're different things, but they're related.
I think the key to it is that if you don't have any sense of what's right and wrong, and so therefore you're not able to recognize even when you are under attack, then if you don't recognize that, then there's no indignation. There's no you don't it's not obvious to you that you should just say no. Like what you should do to fight back in response or whatever is I think a different thing. But you have to have that sense first of like, hell no. Like, I mean, and we all have that line. Maybe that line is maybe it takes someone to attack your child in front of you for you to be like, no, like, I'm not going to allow this to happen. Everyone's got that line, but we push the line all the way down to the most unidealistic version of ourselves, I guess, like the weakest version of ourselves as humans. I think, we're just trying to literally protect our physical state of comfort. And then that might be where we draw the line, but probably not even there if we go gradually, and, but if you don't know right and wrong, you can't recognize when you're under attack. If you can't recognize when you're under attack, then moral courage is almost impossible to come by because you don't even recognize that it's time for it. That you have to fight for yourself.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I like books like The Lord of the Rings, which is full of examples of moral courage. But that's, I guess, being relegated to kind of like children's fairy tales. Kids are probably told that, oh, it's irrelevant and that's not the real world. And, you know,
Yep, I think so. So I want to tell you two examples of other moral courage I saw, just because I think that you'll find them interesting. And one of them, videos I saw recently. One of them was a small business owner who owned a restaurant in California, who, had followed all the rules, done what everyone said, and it didn't matter. Like the health inspector was still coming and messing with him, and so the health inspector, shows up and cites him, and he gets his gigantic pickup truck and boxes the health inspector's car in. That's all he does. Like he doesn't attack him or anything, but he goes, "If we can't work, you can't work." You know, and of course, he called the police, and the police are there. And then there was this moment of, the problem is a lot of people don't understand that they think the police are they just doing their job. They give them that pass every time, and they're nice to them. This guy sees the health inspector as attacking him. When the police show up, there's this one moment of clarity he has. It's just passing where he goes, all of you, putting them with the police with the health inspector, are all still getting a paycheck. All of you. So you put them in the same category as the health inspector. But my chef, who just had a baby, doesn't. None of us do. Like, how can you say you're just doing your job? Let us do ours. And
yeah,
it was wonderful.
I'm sure there wasn't any answer from the government employees.
It was just like, yeah, sir, but you need to move your car. You need to,
Yeah,
we
right.
could talk about it. We could talk.
Yeah,
They talked him down. They talked him down.
yeah.
But he
At
was like,
best,
I
at,
don't know.
at best, somebody would have said, "Hey, man, we're just driving the train."
Exactly. I think people don't know enough about history to understand that we have been through this, and we understand that that's an unacceptable excuse.
Yeah,
I think it's a non
yeah.
history. So the one other one is from a couple days ago. A young lady, probably I'm guessing, mid to late 20s, who goes into I think a CVS, and she's not wearing a mask, and they confront her on it, and she goes, I'm not taking it anymore. Like asystematic spread is proven not to be a thing. Like it's not to be a thing. And she goes, I'm not sick. Why would I put a mask on myself? Like, why would a healthy person ever wear a mask? And this old lady goes up to her and says, "Oh, everyone's having a hard time, just," she goes, "No, I'm not having a hard time. I'm just not doing it anymore. I'm not doing any of this anymore." And the lady goes, and the old lady tells her, "Well, we're gonna have to call the police." And she goes, "Call the police. What are they going to do?" Like, but there was so to me, again, this moral indignation almost has to, or this at least indignation must happen almost for the average human in order to get them to stand up in a way, to defend themselves.
I've got to believe that mask wearing conspiracy, well, it's basically having everybody, wear a red armband or something like
Exactly right.
that. That's,
Exactly right.
to show that, oh yeah, we're with you, kind of.
Yep.
It's nothing but virtue signaling from every point of view.
And if you compare it to an armband, it becomes a pretty terrifying social signal that I wouldn't want to be part of in any way. I don't want any part of that.
Well, that's next though, Matt, because when the economy really does collapse, stock market heads down, interest rates start heading up, unemployment gets worse, and so forth, and the Greater Depression goes into full blossom, I promise you that people are going to be wearing armbands, and we're going to have the equivalent of the brown shirts and the reds rioting in the streets.
God, I know you're right. It just seems like people would be smart enough to avoid that particular symbol, that like the armband itself, but I think it'll happen.
No, they're not going to do it. They're absolutely not going to do it. Wow. So, listen, one thing I was going to say, anybody that's listening, if anybody's stuck with us for this much longer, they ought to send us any good examples that they can think of moral courage or the lack thereof in recent days.
I'd love to see them. Definitely. Please post them in the comments, or you can, post them in the comments is probably the easiest way of doing it. But yeah, I'd love to see more examples of it. And I bet you they're out there. And I think that the more people are aware of them, the easier it is for others to call it in themselves to the surface. And I don't think it's something we fight the world in, but when the world penetrates your own existence, when it comes at you, I think there has to be a point where you're willing to draw the line, and you want to be like Solzhenitsyn, where you're drawing the line too late when you're in the work camp in Siberia, or would you rather know in advance, essentially, that you should at least do something, you should at least try?
I kind of doubt that we'll get any examples sent to us that come from the mainstream media, because they specialize in the opposite of moral courage. They specialize in, examples of people rolling over and showing moral cowardice.
Solidarity, you mean, Doug? Solidarity,
yes. Right, exactly.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Definitely clears up my thinking about this. And I'd love to see some examples from all of you. If you're watching, put them in the comments, and I'll make sure Doug sees them as well. So thanks, Doug.